Mollie Eastman. Welcome to the Fieldswell Podcast.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. So, I'm so excited to have you on. You are the founder and host of Sleep is a Skill. And you are one of the most passionate voices in the sleep space today. And our listeners need to hear it.
I so appreciate you framing it in that way, because especially considering where I came from, so the whole origin of this was quite circuitous of a path, and it began with my own struggles with my sleep. So if I could have shown my old insomniac self this future, I mean, I wouldn't have even believed it, you know? So,
That was one of my questions. Like, was the vision at the beginning of this? I know that, some of the backstory, which we'll tell our listeners, like it came from your own struggles. And so to turn what became your like path into a thriving business, that's a whole nother level. So tell us more about kind of how this started for you and if your vision was ever as big as what it's become today.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that, and it's truly is my mission on the planet to help support as many people as possible with their sleep. Knowing how just down and out I was when I was going through this period of
Mhm.
insomnia completely changed the course of my life. And I also feel like I really dodged a bullet because, so this all happened about a decade ago, traveling internationally. I went to different doctors, left with a myriad of different types of sleeping pills. And I feel as if because each spot that I went to, while I was not left with it was like malicious intent or something, but it was unfortunately
Mhm.
out of bred, I believe, out of a system where doctors unfortunately just aren't educated on sleep to the degree that is warranted considering even just the numbers by which we do it. So, for instance, out of Harvard Med, the average doctor is getting around 2 hours of training in sleep, and it's something we do a third of our lives on average, 20
Right.
years spent asleep. So, the numbers don't really match up, and so I do foresee that the tides are turning, and that we will see some change there. But certainly a decade ago, and even sadly now, we still really have to educate and advocate for ourselves. That's why we call it sleep is a skill. Then from that framing, we can remove any sort of morality or ethics or natural aptitude or what have you. And then also know that this is a skill set in our modern society. So we'll get more into that as to why that is the case. But certainly for me, I feel like I dodged this bullet because I also came from a family with a lot of mental health issues. And
Mhm.
so we did see a lot of people in my family observed and witness and still witness lots of heavy medication use and a lot of sleep issues in the midst of all that. So that was another reason for the fueling of the fire for me to really get up under this because when this all happened, it was like a "Oh, no. Is this the moment when I'm gonna go down that same path?" And sadly, I think a lot of the people that I saw just from my own personal story, but then what I see all the time is people coming our way that unfortunately, many decades often they've been on these heavy duty drugs that are not often for long-term use. So we're talking about benzos, Z drugs, and they're really meant for short-term use when it comes to sleep. So the fact that then I was able to thankfully get into different conversations, explored alternative routes to heal this problem with my sleep and have the opportunity to actually have it be a gift was just
Mhm.
so remarkable. And so to your point around like, did we foresee any of this happening? No, not. And I'm so grateful because I really passionately believe if anyone is listening and they are really struggling with their sleep right now, to have this potential reframe, which you might think, no way could this be, but I really believe I would like for people to latch on or try on that this bears the opportunity to be one of the greatest breakthroughs in our lives. A gift
Yes.
is available because often when our sleep isn't working, our life isn't working in some way, shape, or form. It's really a real barometer of the workability of our lives. And now that can also apply to from a physiological perspective or anatomical even. So when we talk about sleep disorders, there's over 100 sleep wake disorders. And, if so many people, so even anatomically something might not be working, physically something might not be working if we're experiencing weight gain, hormonal disruptions, et cetera, et cetera. So could be in a health domain and often bleeds into other areas. So how are our finances? Are those keeping us up at night and upregulated?
Yes.
Was our romantic relationships, our friendships are so it allows us to kind of
Mhm.
audit the workability of our lives, and when you're not sleeping, you're usually willing to do a lot more, than you might normally would be open to, you know? So it
Yeah.
serves as breeding ground for personal development.
I mean, 100%. It is safe to say that sleep affects everything else in your life. And it has been one of my biggest productivity hacks. I'm here. Do you have your Aura ring on?
I actually don't have it on because right now I have been, just for context for anyone listening, we have a very large Oura Ring database. So we work with tons of pieces of data for many people with Oura Ring, especially. And then we also work with Whoop and other things, which we also love. And yet, Aura has been like our bread and butter for many, many, many years. And I'm writing a book and I'm doing a data vacation for a period of time to be able to speak
Okay.
to the differences. So it's been an interesting time for me to have a little period of time, but you've got yours?
I have to know what's your highest Aura score.
Oh, well, I got a 99 and my husband got a 100, so, there's
Oh
no
my
infighting.
gosh.
The
Okay,
husband
we
gets
need to
the
talk.
100. Rude.
Was that like a one-time thing or could he consistently get 100?
He has only gotten 100 one time. I've seen 100 a few smatterings of times, from different
Okay.
people. And then, of course, there's the different kind of brackets. So sometimes it's 100 in activities, 100 in readiness, 100 in sleep, but never all across the board. Yeah, it's interesting because they are a tough judge.
Totally. Well, I'm proud of my 98. That's my highest score so far. And I want to know how to crack that 100 and we're going to get into that. But first I think it's important for our listeners to really understand like a lot of the individuals may be going to a doctor because they're having sleep issues and they're prescribed Xanax, Valium or any of the other things that you talked about. Beyond that, I think let's set the stage for like the science behind a good night's sleep, what some of the repercussions are, or the long-term consequences are for not prioritizing your sleep.
Okay, as I'm speaking to, because I always try to be, thoughtful of insomniacs, so meaning that everything I'm about to say, just so if anyone is dealing with insomnia, difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, just wanna preface with we address that group a little differently, and so the group that we might be speaking to that they're busy, sleep's kind of an afterthought, or they're in dealing with, bedtime procrastination, revenge bedtime procrastination, which people might have heard of. It's kind of sweeping TikTok and Instagram or whatever. The group that just sleep hasn't been at the forefront of the things that they've been prioritizing. So we speak to them from some of the, real world concerns, et cetera. And a quick caveat for the insomniacs, they're an interesting group, and I was one of them, so that's partly why I try to advocate for them, is that, they are a group that desperately wants to get sleep. So sometimes when I share the things I'm about to share, that group can be, "Oh, no, that's even worse than I thought. Now I'm gonna so in trouble." Like, it's gonna be a
Right.
mess. And so I want to let that group know that oddly, we're actually trying to train for and getting into our mind this paradoxical thought process around sleep where we're building
Mhm.
resiliency to know that even if you're all revved up right now, even if you're not having the best sleep, even if you're waking up and you're up at 3 in the morning and all day or whatever, uh, even if it's that period of time, trusting that that's not forever, because now we're going to train ourselves. We're going to learn about this. We're going to go in deeper. But for
Mhm.
now, trusting that your body is not fragile and that you've been here before. There's been times where you only got a couple hours of sleep and you were able to make it through the day. Maybe it wasn't your favorite, but you made it through. So don't get too scared about all the things that I'm going to say about, impacts around sleep deprivation because trust that you'll handle this. So addressing the group that maybe hasn't been prioritizing sleep as much. So lots of things. One, in 2012, glymphatic drainage with a G was discovered versus lymphatic drainage with an L when you get your massages or whatever. Glymphatic drainage with a G got a lot of press and is getting a lot of press because that's a process that happens during deep sleep. And that's on the first half of our night, largely. And during that period, glymphatic drainage is that kind of washing out the cleansing of the brain from all the
Mhm.
accumulated sort of toxins that have been just by virtue of existing throughout your course of your day that have been accumulating. And so by washing those out, and literally from a gravity perspective, it's going down through the brain. The brain actually shrinks in size to make room for this fluid to then flush out these toxins. Now, when that is not optimal or not happening consistently, then what seems to happen, this accumulation of this amyloid plaque, so it's amyloid beta plaque. And this plaque seems to be also found in neurodegenerative disorders like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia. And
Mhm.
this is big news because for a long time, we didn't have a lot of ways that we could kind of stave off potentially or hopefully make an impact in our ability to
Right.
prevent some of those disorders down the road. So that's one of the reasons why it's getting more press in recent years. So there's that. But then there's more.
There's more.
They
Yes.
they for ins and lots of research to support this too. So for instance, getting less than around 6 hours consistently, strong meta-analysis that points to things like stroke, cognitive decline, all-cause mortality, so death from any cause, amping up, and so many more deleterious effects. So if you go to PubMed and look at sleep deprivation and just about anything that's important to you, productivity, as you were pointing to,
Right.
aging. So from a vanity perspective, so our skin health and just overall vitality, hormonal health and balance. One of the things that we can point to, and actually the DoD is really aiming to make this point known, it's especially for higher groups that have more men in their domain, pointing to market drops in testosterone when we're not getting
Mhm.
sleep. And then what they're even calling the point of no return when eventually you're just undersleeping and not prioritizing sleep so much that you are no longer able to access the same amounts of testosterone that you were before. So that's a big deal in that world, hopefully from a motivation perspective. And then same rules apply for women. So then for our sex hormones and for our thyroid health, it's just you can keep rattling it on. But then it even spills
Totally.
our mental health, our fertility, um,
Huge mental health.
the
Yeah.
mental health one is absolutely profound, and then it even goes into interpersonal communications, our ability to read other people and get
Mhm.
kind of their emotional or their intended meanings behind even reading faces and beyond.
Mhm.
So it's really, really fascinating. And then the nice thing is though, as we educate ourselves and learn more about sleep and start to manage things differently, we get the exact opposite of everything I just went off.
Right.
You can improve all those markers, which is just a really exciting.
And even when we hear all of this, individuals still aren't prioritizing it. And I feel like it is one of the biggest changes and most beneficial changes you could make in your life is to start prioritizing your sleep. Let's get into some of the things that may be disrupting our sleep that we may not even realize or be paying attention to.
So, again, for that group that is not prioritizing, I find them to be a wonderful group for wearables. So sometimes when we are dealing with insomnia, we're only making it in a couple hours. We're freaked out, we're anxious, we're a whole mess. That might not be the time for wearables for that group, but for the group that is, they're sleeping. They're just looking to
Mhm.
optimize. Maybe it's just something they're feeling a little off and whatever. That group can be wonderful for wearables. And that first off, I find really brings the behavioral piece that we need for real change with sleep. Because what happens with sleep, you can learn all this stuff, but unless we enact these things time after time, and that's one of the cool
Yes.
things with wearables is that you're in the game of it. You're getting the
Mhm.
information every single morning. You can't forget it and what have you. So I would say then if we're standing in the wearable piece, and I'm not saying everyone has to get wearables, but if you do opt for that, um, one thing that shines very clearly is the impact of things like alcohol. I mean, this is the most obvious one I
Yes.
know, but it's one that's very notable for people with wearables is just how much of it obliterates not only your sleep but nervous system metrics.
Mhm.
So your heart
Mhm.
rate, your HRV, your respiratory rate, your body temperature, and then if you're also dealing with sleep disorders, of which there are over 100 sleep wake disorders, that many, many people are running around undiagnosed, or even if they are diagnosed, they're not being treated or they haven't found something that they can be compliant around. They're going to really have a flare up of those symptoms when they add alcohol in. So it's just a clear one. And then that spills into other things around the domain that I refer to as chronopharmacology. So the timing of our drugs. And
Hmm.
so even the timing of that alcohol, of course, plays a role. Timing of your things like THC, timing of things like caffeine, timing of things like
Yes.
stimulants, prescription medications, and then even supplements can sometimes be deleterious depending on the timing or type that you might be taking if it's not agreeing
Hmm.
with you. So those are, things that I think you might have a common sense piece around for the average person. However, things that I think maybe not everyone quite gets the impact, where we begin is looking at circadian rhythm entrainment for people. And we start with light dark because it's the most powerful zeitgeber or time giver for circadian health. And so what does that look like? Well, I mean, I'm doing my podcast out here in Austin heat, just partly to be able to get more unadulterated sunlight throughout the course of the day, because we are looking for brighter days and darker nights and that full spectrum light. So that can become a whole rabbit hole in and of itself. You could do multiple podcasts just on the impact and the physics of
Right.
on your health. But that is a crucial one for a few reasons. We absolutely need that morning sunlight without the sunglasses, hats, and all the things. And so we want to do that every single morning. But then we also do want to dip it throughout the rest of the day to also make sure that we're getting certainly UVA and UVB.
Hmm.
Often that's the one you hear cut out where people will say, "Oh, well then, seek shade or whatever, like for the rest of the day." But
Yeah.
then you're leaving out vitamin D, which is
Hmm.
crucial for sleep, part of the concoction to get ourselves to create serotonin, and then that's that precursor to melatonin. So if we're not, being able to create that, which many, like a huge swath of the population are deficient in vitamin D, so
Yeah.
right out of the gate, you're absolutely not
Hmm.
the level of sleep that you could be getting right there,
Hmm.
and then that can have some spillover effects into other hormonal issues and immune function issues and other things and inflammation, etcetera.
Yeah.
So we start there. Then we also need the flip side of it is total darkness at night, and then,
Yes.
line
Like a
right
cave.
exactly.
Yeah.
Total
Yes.
cave, while we're sleeping, and then in the hours before sleep, and especially post
Hmm.
sunset, this is where I see people often go awry is that then they're like, "Well, let's turn on the lights and whatever." But those lights are really problematic too. Actually, just a couple years ago, around 249 circadian scientists referencing nearly 2,700 peer-reviewed publications are all calling for warning labels on plain old light bulbs when used at night.
Wow.
And they're citing things like mental health disorders, psychiatric disorders, well, in conjunction, fertility issues, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, the list keeps going. And of course, our sleep being impaired. So that's just with those, regular old light bulbs at night. So we want to
Did you switch out your light bulbs in your home?
so I just really don't use any of the overhead, like, hockey puck type lightings. So I don't really use those. What we do instead in this is a newer place for us. We just came here a couple of months ago. I did have to have a, like, compromise with my husband because this place, he didn't wanna have all red everywhere. So what I have to do some footage on this, is, I have a bunch and just about, like, all
Mhm.
over, these little mini Himalayan salt lamps that are like
Okay.
a little soft glow. So I've got those, and then I've got some incandescent lights. So incandescent light bulbs are very different than, regular light bulbs. They were the ones that kind of the Edison creation about 150 years ago, and the makeup of those are very similar to sunset and sunrise. So they have a
Okay.
very high output of red and orange in them, so much more akin to fire. So we've got some of those, but then we do so he had to agree to deal with some, like, red in our bedroom area, and, so we've still got some red poking out, but in our old place, it was all red. It was like a brothel,
Oh my gosh.
without the brothel activity, we think,
Right.
but whereas, here, so Himalayan salt lamps, you can bring in incandescent light bulbs, kind of small and very, low, soft, element of that, and you wanna measure this so that it can really kind of cross that or make sure it passes that sort of test. So how do you measure it? You get things like, the My Circadian app can help you measure the lux in the environment. So you can measure how much lux is outside and just about most often in an outdoor lighting environment. You can get up, depending on where you are on the globe and the, cloud coverage, et cetera, up to 100,000 lux or more. But then you go inside, and usually by day, it's going to be less than around 500 lux, which is woefully insufficient to kind of signal all the things that we're looking to signal for our clocks and resetting our master clocks. But then at night, you want to get it really low. We're talking like double digits, ideally, for the majority of your nights, so sub like 20. And then as we get closer to bed, I would like to see it in single digits, which is more akin to candlelight, like a 7 lux and that sort of thing. And so you measure all this and see, is it passing that test really?
Yeah. There are now companies who go into your home and help with this sort of lighting to orient you for better sleep and overall well being. I think we're realizing the effects that light has on us.
Circadian aligned environments and building biology is absolutely gonna be an emerging area, since we're all spending so much time in our spaces. So, I often cite a study in 2001, the EPA did a study, and they found that the average person was spending over 90% of their time inside, or indoor
Mm,
environments. So it broke down to about,
mhm.
93% total and a little portion in automobiles and the vast sweeping majority in, indoor environments. And so that is, a factor or something to consider because not only is that light impaired that we talked about, even just behind a window, getting the light behind windows is not the same as coming outside. And then so it's still better, don't get me wrong, like, it's better to be in a window-filled room than a dark cave by day. Um, but then the other problem is when we're inside, all kinds of other things go awry. So one, we tend to have set point, temperatures. So we, might often see like, whatever, 72 degrees throughout morning, noon, night, etcetera. And we would have never experienced that in nature because in nature, there's a dynamic change to our temperature. And that's why we know, or well, it's a component to be thoughtful about that our body temperature is dynamic as well. And that's a big signal to wind down at night is to drop our body temperature, and that helps support the building of melatonin. So temperature is a big one as well.
Totally. This nervous system regulation. So I know for me, when I was biohacking my sleep, alcohol and caffeine were the first two things I cut out just to get back to my baseline. And that made a drastic difference. When I see individuals as a coach come in for maybe they're experiencing anxiety, I of course ask, what is the drink? What is the alcohol and caffeine intake? Because those drastically affect your sleep. And I wholeheartedly believe like when you get a good night's sleep, you are a different person the next day. You have so much more energy to create and show up for the things that matter to you. Did you, as you know, when you were going through this journey, do you drink caffeine or alcohol or did you cut them out completely or more so just now in moderation?
Yeah, really good questions. Okay, so in the build up as I was getting closer to that period of time, when I went through that period of insomnia, I was having, a lot more caffeine at the time, and so that I cut that out, and I had started to drop down on alcohol as compared to, like, my 20s or something, but I still had it somewhat. Since then, knowing what I know about sleep, the experience that I feel the next day, I very rarely, I mean, maybe it's like a drink or 2 the last couple years, and so I don't know, and really in the last year and more, like, no drinks, just because
Mhm.
why? Just for my experience, like right?
To poison ourselves, it's hard. I enjoy having fun. I
Yeah.
enjoy a skinny
Yeah.
spicy margarita, but I always feel it the next day.
I feel it so much the next day,
Yeah.
and even that night, like, I and even, so for me, I'm very sensitive to it, and so I often might get a headache or I'm waking up throughout the course of the night, it gets hot, and I like to share a lot of, like, alternatives because
Yes.
for our clients, because often it can feel like, "Okay, I'm just subtracting all the fun," like, because if you
Right.
feel like,
Right.
the reason we're doing it so we often call them, like, alternative state changers, because 'cause we're really just looking to change our state in some way, shape, or form. So we try to still give people, myself included, alternative options. So one is hard ketones. Hard ketones can be really helpful, as an alternative because it still has an element of alcohol, quote unquote, but it, is ethanol free, and so it's devoid of that very thing that usually just makes us obliterate our sleep and mess with our
Right.
next day. So that's one of the few things I found after seeing so many people test those out with wearables, not hitting at sleep at all like alcohol. So that's really
Mhm.
cool. Then looking at things like kava, controversially kratom, but I would still argue that all of these I see as making a huge, way less of a concern I have of those
Uh-huh.
personally out of the research I've seen and the results I see than alcohol, even though it's like socially acceptable. But it's just absolutely, I mean, the whole idea of like, oh, in moderation, no, like,
Right.
you see what happens to your sleep with that, especially
Yeah.
when it gets closer to your bedtime. I know my husband says I should have a show, Molly Ruins Everything. I know it's not the best,
Come on,
name.
Molly, we still wanna have fun,
I know,
okay?
exactly, exactly. So then another controversial fun haver potentially, can be nicotine and having low dose nicotine. Some people have been seeing that, pop up more in the biohacking space or even, this one spills into the caffeine piece that you mentioned. Yeah, I really don't, have much caffeine nowadays, so I might have, like, something small, like a mud water or pyrazanthine is another, one. So pyrazanthine is kind of a downstream component that would naturally occur with caffeine, but it doesn't have the same hit on that kinda
Mhm.
jittery nervous system activation, but also
Mhm.
it doesn't seem to hit at sleep in the same way because it doesn't impact, adenosine receptors, akin to how you would see, with caffeine. So you can get away with having a little bit of that later into your day. So that's a nice one to explore too. So
Yeah.
those would be things that I would have people check out instead,
Mhm.
of the traditional, supports.
Super helpful. We love alternatives and other additives to continue our fun journey. So, for me, I believe that our day begins the night before, and
Yep.
that is with how we sleep. It completely is going to impact our next day. For me, wind down routines are huge. My phone sleeps in the kitchen, and that space away from technology has really given me a lot more time back in my day and space just to be with myself and have a calmer evening. Dimming the lights, taking a warm shower, doing a skincare routine, doing some journaling, laying under my red light. And then I'd love to sleep with it super colder, like 68 degrees. And then I have a sound machine and the room is pitch black. So I
Yep.
have a lot of things set up. I'm curious if there for you are any other, nighttime routine tips you have for our listeners.
Yeah, so good. I love your routine. That sounds perfect. Couple things. So when we're layering in heat can be really helpful because oddly it has this paradoxical cooling effect after it's initiated. So just ensuring that you're leaving. So for any listeners that are dabbling with sauna, warm bath, hot shower, etc. That you're just giving yourself a little bit of buffer time to cool down the body thereafter. Now, this does seem to have some bio-individuality because, we do see that some people are able to kind of bring that body temperature back down and then even cooler, that it would have been without that intervention, but some people need more time. So it seems to be bare minimum around 2 hours before bed, to give yourself that wind down time ideally, and the cool down time. And then I would also underscore too the abstaining from eating in the hours before bed. And of course, the conservative estimates are recommendations are 2 to 3 hours. So definitely that for your last bite of food. However, I would just share that anecdotally, we need more research, and there are some small studies, but we do need more. But we are seeing with wearable data on the ground, marked improvements when you go even further than that. So 4 hours, 5 hours, six
Oh,
hours, or
yeah.
more, right?
I love eating at like 5 p.m. I love an early dinner.
Love an early dinner, right? Makes such a difference. Exactly. And this has a name and it's known as circadian rhythm intermittent fasting. And how can we align with the rhythms of nature so that we're largely eating when the sun is out and then we're giving ourselves a bit of a digestive break when the sun has then set.
Mhm.
So, and people can say, well, in the summer, sure, that's great, but in certain areas, then when the sun has set, that is happening really early. So from that place, you're looking to stop eating at around that time. So for some places, it might be like 4:30, 5 p.m., or what have you. So playing with that. Now, of course, we're not being militant, and there can be an ebb and
Right.
a flow here, but just something to notice the difference. And often you'll see with both of those things that we just mentioned, even alone, the temperature piece, so the heating up to cool down with enough time before bed, and then the meal timing move back often is really supportive of deep sleep, especially. But then there's all kinds of other things that people can explore. I love that you mentioned the temperature. Whenever I just had a friend stay over the other night, and she was, like, freezing in our place. We make it totally Arctic. There's recommendations out of, the Sleep Foundation to, set your temperature, ambient temperature, to anywhere between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit. And then I like to then also layer in cooling mattress toppers, because this all would be akin to closer, presumably, than how we would have slept in nature. So we likely would have slept on the ground, which would have been the coolest place in the environment. And we would have never slept anything like what we're doing now, which is like often foam mattresses with a giant duvet on top, and you're cooking inside there
Right.
like rotisserie chicken all night long, because
Yeah.
your body temperature is close to 100 degrees, and then you're just trapping all that heat. Whereas cooling mattress toppers or mattresses themselves can help regulate that, and which the Earth would have done in the past. And that was by far we were living like that, so it's still kind of in our DNA for way longer than we've been doing this odd thing of bed.
Yeah. Is Sleep 8 the brand that you recommend for that cooling
Yes,
mattress topper?
yes, yes. Now, full disclosure, we are sponsored by 8 Sleeps for sure.
8 Sleep. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say, there's really only a couple games in town as it relates to the cooling mattress toppers.
Mhm.
And 8 has been wonderful. They've definitely got a great product from a perspective of you don't even feel like you don't know that you're laying on this thing, and it just kind of can go on any mattress that you existingly have. And actually, when people often ask me about mattresses, um, I usually don't have too much to share with them beyond the fact that, checking to ensure that ideally we're going for organic, and if we're concerned about EMFs, that we're not having coils within them, and that we're looking for certain, marks of kind of third party testing and other things of that nature. And then we're looking to see that it can support our sleep position, which for most people, we are recommending typically side sleeping, because on the sleeping on the back can flare up our different snoring or obstructive apneas, etc. So you're looking for something comfortable, of course, but temperature is my main concern for people, because that's the thing that we see like overnight make a difference. Now, of course, you want to be comfortable, you don't want to be in pain or something, but getting that cooling piece. And then I still also love chili sleep as well. They're wonderful. They, one thing I like about them is that they offer, just single sides too. So if it's just you, or, your partner's not interested in this, or you're on a budget, then you can just get like a single side. So there's just ways to always make this all work so that we can have this support.
And that's why I love we say sleep is a skill because there's so much to learn and there's so many ways you can improve it. Another thing that I'd love to touch on for our audience is having a consistent sleep wake cycle. So aiming to go to bed around the same time every night and wake up around the same time every morning because then your body can get on a routine.
Yes. Oh, so good. Okay. I love that you brought that up, because we have two anchor habits that we have everyone start with, like no matter who you are. And we touched on some of them, which is the light dark piece. So bright days, dark nights. So that's just like the anchoring, both from a sleep perspective and also a psychological perspective, a cellular kind of perspective from a signaling of safety. To be attuned to those things is kind of as opposed to a cell danger response where some of us might be all, angsty and hypervigilant, and that's often happening when our sleep is awry. Then those safety signals, like the light dark, is huge. But then the other anchor is that level of consistency, and that is a huge one. Now, we especially underscore the wake up time. And we do that intentionally because that's an area that you can always have a say over. So you can always wake up at around the same time and, to support yourself, whether you got to do a couple alarms wherever you're at, but you can make that happen. Whereas our bedtime, we find if we don't want people to feel like this sense of pressure, like, "Oh, no, I said I was gonna be asleep by 10 and now it's 10:20. Oh, no, now it's 10:40. Ah, like, I'm screwed." So instead, we are, setting the stage, like, all that the beautiful kind of wind down that you were speaking to, just like, sleep training for kids, we're doing that for adults, for ourselves, to kinda have those same repeatable, calming, reliable things, and ideally, if any of those can go on the road, like maybe your skincare routine or maybe some of the red light or whatever, if those can then be portable, and be something that even when you're bouncing all around, you're on the other side of the globe or something, that you can still signal to your body familiarity, safety, routine, all of that can be really, really great. Some add-ons, sometimes can be things like PMF, options, although that can be controversial depending on if you're coming from a quantum biology lens or not, but that can be kind of a potential wind down aid. Lots in the certainly out of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI, which is the main gold standard for when people are dealing with insomnia at the moment. Not to say that there aren't others, but that has the most research right now. Um, there are recommendations to kind of brain dump, like get all of those stressors out of your head and onto paper.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned the kind of like process, the journaling or what have you. We have research as well for gratitude and its support of things like sleep latency, your ability to fall asleep, and then even if you do wake up, return back to sleep as well.
Mhm, mhm. And for me, I know, like, those evenings when you're laying in bed and you can't fall asleep, that can be really frustrating, and that's why I love some of those habits because they definitely do help with it. There are still the nights for me when it's difficult. You have a lot on your mind. It's been an intense day. Maybe there's something big happening tomorrow. I'm curious what your opinion is. I have these 1 milligram melatonin little capsules, and on a rare occasion, I do take those. What is your opinion on melatonin? And perhaps if you're not a huge fan, what should we be opting for instead?
Yeah, that is a great question. So there's kind of three schools of thought on the melatonin piece. There's abstaining totally. There's kind of mid tier where it's kind of low dose, and then there's high dose melatonin group as well. And high dose shows some evidence for things like high viral load. So it got some press during COVID, but also cancer research and other instances where that could make sense in certain cases. Then that mid tier, we're certainly seeing research where, um, so things like jet lag, if you're hopping tons of time zones, there's high efficacy of the utilization of that to just start to slowly course correct your circadian rhythm and get that back on track. And then there is some research for certain groups. So, as we age, potentially dropping in some of our ability to create melatonin. So, that might be a group, sometimes, people dealing with certain disorders, so, autism is one that we might see people utilizing melatonin. But I would say for the majority of people, what I find is that most people are not doing all the things that, we're kind of touching on. So, we mentioned light, dark, consistent sleep wake timing, temperature timing, meal timing,
Mhm.
and type, because getting that glucose regulated, I mean, right there, some of the stats are that around 93% of Americans are dealing with some form of metabolic dysfunction, and we know that
Right.
that can disrupt sleep. Right out of the gate, most people are already in trouble, as it relates to their sleep. And then moving into exercise timing and type, because that can play a role, of course, in our sleep results. Thought timing, a really fascinating one. So, like you mentioned, so if you've had a busy day, lots on your plate, there's something happening for the next day, but also thoughts exist on a circadian rhythm, which is really fascinating. So the types of thoughts that you might have at 8 a.m., very different at 8 p.m., and then moving into wee hours in the morning, where we have research to support that the wee hours of the morning ones are kind of concerning trends for the way we're thinking. So more like black and white thinking, catastrophic thinking, etc. And then lastly, that chronopharmacology. So some of our drugs might be throwing off the ability to create melatonin as well. So all of those things, typically what I find is when we start enacting all of those, and that can take a little bit of time, a little bit of behavioral change, and identity shifts, etc. that often this will work out itself. And so then we are able to create sufficient melatonin. But for those one-off times, I often don't see too much of a deleterious effect by bringing those in periodically for added support. As long as we're not dealing with a sense of then reliance on these things or what have you. And then there can be other stacks that sometimes can be helpful. When we do have high cortisol and we're just dealing with a lot. But usually, what I like to do is really the test not guess piece for people, because oftentimes we can find, measurably what's going on. So there might be issues with iron load. There might be insufficient B vitamins. There might be issues with vitamin D. There might be thyroid problems, hormonal issues, right? And so then we can be more thoughtful versus just throwing things.
Instead of just supplementing for something you may not have a deficiency in, let's
Yeah.
get the benchmark and get everything tested so we know where we're at for a baseline.
Exactly. That's
Mhm.
exactly right.
Yeah. Molly, I wish we could go on for hours with this. There's so much and so many different things we can do to strengthen our sleep skill.
Yeah, that's well said.
And
Like,
so I'm curious for you as we begin to wrap up. Tell us more, about sleep as a skill, how we can help support you, how we can follow along with what you're doing, and perhaps if there's anything else you'd like to leave our audience with today.
oh, thank you for that, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to share on this
Mhm.
topic. What I would just say is to try on this concept that sleep is a skill. And so no matter if you're sleeping fine and you're just looking to see about up leveling that skill set, so maybe you're already intermediate or what have you, can we take it to the next level to this advanced way of managing our sleep in our life, our sleep wake cycle? And then also, if we're really struggling, the reframe can often be empowering versus just like, well, I guess I'm broken. I guess, I'm a bad sleeper. My dad was a bad sleeper. My mom was a bad sleeper. It's in my genes. I
Yeah.
guess this is it. Whereas like throwing that out is so
Yes.
important. So whoever you are, wherever you're at with your sleep, then few things that you can do. You can one go to sleepisaskill.com. There you can take a sleep assessment and get some information sent back to you right away on some things that you might be dealing with specifically. Then you can sign up for our newsletter that's been running for 7 years strong with going out every Monday. We've never missed a Monday, so I'd love to have people on there. And then we also have other things at play. So we've got our podcast with, I think, over around 300 episodes that we recorded there with different experts, cohorts, audits, so wearable audits. And then lastly, one-on-one options. So we do work with a lot of high stakes poker players of all things.
So
So
cool.
yeah, and I share that just because they are specifically many of them in casinos that are designed on purpose to confuse the circadian rhythm. So if
Yes.
we can get relief for them, I assure you we can get relief for anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Your sleep identity doesn't need to be fixed.
Yes.
It's something that can be easily changed. Look at all these different ways you can start to improve your sleep. And if you need help, Molly and I are both here to give you
Yeah.
our advice and tips on what has really helped change the game for us. Because I know for me, I can't reiterate this enough how much prioritizing sleep has completely changed my life and my potential.
Oh, I love that. So well said. Yes. And then also, like you said, too, the knowledge that we're all going to have off nights. Like there's going to be some times where whatever, you stayed out a little bit later, or you have something big the next day and what have you. But the skill lies in the resiliency to bounce back and trust that our body, is working for us and that we're doing things to support it versus, make it more harder than it needs to be.
Totally. I like to joke that having a 9 p.m. bedtime at 32 is no simple feat, but it's
Yes.
totally worth it.
It's totally worth it. That is
Yeah.
amazing. Yes, keep that going.
Molly, you're so wonderful. Thank you for
Perfect, gotcha.
taking the time today. I wish you continued success with your journey, and I'm so inspired with the mission that you have set
Oh,
out on. So thank
well,
you.
thank you for saying that. Thank you for all the work you're
Mhm.
doing. It makes such a difference. And again, really appreciate the opportunity. It truly is my mission on the planet to get this information out for people. So I hope that if anyone is listening or if anything was not covered or confusing or whatever, don't hesitate to reach out. Really welcomed, any of this feedback.